Today let's go over 3 different woodworking projects that you can sell so that way you can fund your expensive hobby and not feel guilty about it. Let's go. So first, a product that needs no introduction. This is a cutting board, if you can't tell. Cutting boards are great starter projects. It's every woodworker's rite of passage. You can do these in 2 different ways. You can do these long grain or you can do these end grain like this one is, and they're almost guaranteed to sell out. This is just a little one that I made for my wife. I didn't actually make this one to sell, but I figured I'd bring it out here and just give you a look. You can make these in all different sizes, shapes. You can do charcuterie boards, and they're easy to build and sell out very fast. The next 2 projects are going to be very low cost to build and decently high reward, so your profit margin is going to be better if you're able to push these 2 projects. And I'll tell you again at the end of the video how I would recommend pushing these products. Then you're gonna have no problem building projects in the future. So our first of the inexpensive builds is another classic. This is a tiny ladder that is used for storing towels and blankets against walls. These come in all different shapes and sizes. This one is quite short because I actually built this one for the video, but I wanted to make it functional, and so I'll throw this in the kids' room and it'll hold their little baby blankets and things like that. Altogether, this little guy probably cost me about $5 to build, and I could have built a 6-foot one for the exact same price. Even the finish on it, you can tell this is not the original color of the wood, but the finish on it was dirt cheap. And let's just jump to the build, and I'll also explain what finish I used.
Alright, so first things first, you're going to start with 2 strips of wood in any length that you want. So what I'm using here is I'm using some furring strips because that was cheap lumber that I could buy at my local big box store, and I really just wanted to throw this together for as little amount possible and show you guys that you can build these for almost no money. So for these strips, what I ended up doing was I ended up cutting 2 of them down. One, so that way I had a set of ones that were a little under 4 feet, and the other so that way I had them at about 6 feet, and that one's more realistically what you're going to be aiming for. And then I cut a 10-degree angle on one end. That just gives it that support when you're setting it at a tilt. So once you have your strips cut down to your length that you like, I went ahead and I kind of looked at a couple different spacings between the slats, and I thought that 10 inches looked pretty good, so that's what I kept with. So I'm just going along here and I'm marking every 10 inches. Actually, right here I'm still playing around with what length I want, but then I just mark up and down the board every 10 inches and then transfer those lines to the one that's next to it, and then it's time to start cutting down the slats. I also went with 10 inches for the slats. Once I had all of those cut, it was time to give it a nice little sanding just to make sure everything was smooth, and then I could set it up for clamping and screwing the screws in. Screwing the screws in, because that's what you do with them. Alright, before we start screwing screws, we're gonna clamp everything together, make sure everything's square. I just kind of go back and forth with this little trusty square I've got. This thing hasn't really let me down too bad yet. And then yeah, we're just ready to drive some screws in, make sure everything's secure, and then it's time for finish. Okay, so for the screws here, we're just using these little Deck Plus screws. I don't plan on building a deck anytime soon, and now that I've said that, I'm sure a project will pop up where I'll need these things. But we're just going to use 2 screws for every side. So that's 4 screws per slat. That gives me, what, 16 screws I'll need for this whole thing, because I have 4 slats. And this is, I think, a box of 100 screws, so still pretty cheap as far as cost to produce these things and cost to knock these little guys out. And then once the screws are in, we'll move on to finish. I did add one last thing before I did the finish. I put these little rubber feet on there, so that way if these get moved into an area that has a hard surface floor, they're not going to be sliding under the weight of the blankets. They'll stay nice and secure where they're at. And I already had these laying around. You don't have to add these if you don't want to, but I figured why not. And that's it. You can end it there. You can paint it. You can stain it. I'm going to add a stain that I'll explain to you right now. It's just something I'm playing around with. But that's it. That's what it looks like. Alright, so on the finish for this one, I was really just playing around with something new. I did a process called ebonizing, and it's really just you take a jar, you throw some steel wool in there, and you pour some vinegar on top of it, and you let it sit for about 24 hours. And then after that, you can just brush this solution onto the wood, and it has a chemical reaction with the tannins that are in the wood, and it turns the wood really dark brown naturally, I guess. And this is a really good thing to play around with if you're doing cutting boards and you don't feel like buying a wood like walnut. You can naturally turn a wood a darker color, and it is food safe. So that opens up a world of possibilities, but it does react different with every kind of wood. So I'm just brushing it on here, and then maybe I'll do a video later that has a couple different species of wood, and I'll just slap some ebonizing stuff on there, because as you can see later on in the video, this wood turned really dark brown. That was after about 2 coats, but there are some that turn like jet black. Like I think oak turns jet black. I will say that I wasn't particularly in love with the way that it turned out on this wood. It did kind of give it a dehydrated look. So I'm wondering if maybe you can pair this with an oil solution of some sort, so that way you can also keep the wood hydrated, since it did seem to pull some of the moisture out and make it look kind of dull. But yeah, that's really it for this project. I mean, it's just as easy as get some slats cut and shove them in between 2 planks, and you've got yourself a little ladder. Paint it, finish it whatever color you want, and then move on to the next project.
My third and final project, and this was probably my favorite to build because it took me all of about 3 minutes, is this little, I don't know really what it is. It's kind of like a wall-mounted planter. Now you can do a couple different things with this. I put numbers here. Obviously, if you have more than 3 numbers, even if you have 3, you ought to make this a little taller so that way you can see them. I was just seeing how fast I could throw this guy together. So you can get creative with these. You can cut out a square, inset it in the back, maybe add a piece of glass, and now you have a little wall-mounted garden picture frame. You can make this wider as well, and then you can make a cluster of picture frames. If you go the route of making it wider or having 2 of these side by side, maybe you can add a cork board or something in the center here, or maybe a chalkboard, something that you can write on, store ideas. The possibilities are endless for this. This is basically just a blank canvas you can do absolutely anything you want with. And then underneath it is a tiny little garden for inside of your house. You can plant flowers, you can plant herbs if you want to keep it inside. This one obviously you can post outside, and it has almost like your address on it, so this is a cool little address block that adds a little bit of color and uniqueness to your home. Now let's jump to the build and see how long this thing really takes you, as well as the price point of it.
Alright, so this project, I started with a board that I had left over. This one's just over 18 inches. It's about 18 and a half. Actually, it looks like it's exactly 18 and a half. And I just set my fence, so that way I was going to cut a 4-inch strip. And I cut 2 of these. One for the front, and then one that I split in half for the sides. So you're going to get to see me build this whole project in real time, because it took me about 3 minutes to build the entire thing. It was crazy fast. If you're going to be building these, I highly recommend you reach out to your local nurseries, come up with some kind of arrangement. This should get you woodworking quick, no problem. And the only tool you even need for this is a table saw. I used clamps to hold everything together, but honestly, you could use a pin nailer and just toss it to the side and wait for glue to dry. Alright, so this board that I'm using I did go with 18 and a half inches because that's just what I had laying around. But at the end of it, I thought it looked kind of short. So the one that you see in the other part of the video is actually a second one that I threw together after. And I did the same exact process, so it's the same thing. But I added a few more inches. So realistically, if you start with a board that's about 2 feet long, then you can make one that gives you plenty of room for the top to add an address or a picture frame or whatever you want to add. You could theoretically use a fence picket to build this and get 2 per fence picket, because I think a fence picket is about 6 feet long. So you could probably get 3 per fence picket and spend little to no money pushing these things out. Here's where I'm adjusting my saw so that way I can actually get the sides of the fence picket up. I don't know if you noticed, I measured and I put about 1.5 inches for this one. After I finished, I would have liked to do about 2.5 inches. And don't use... be smart when you're using your table saw. I turn the blade off anytime I put my hand near it, but still, like, this wasn't the best way. You should probably build a sled to make these cuts, so that way you aren't making such thin cuts on your saw. I don't recommend it, because right here, I hold still, I turn the saw off, and I let go just a second early, and I do get that shooting back at me, and that's not a safe way to use your table saw. So learn from my mistakes. So I am left with this spare piece, and this is enough lumber to build a bottom out, which is exactly what I do. At this point, you can glue it together. I would add some pin nails. I didn't for this one. What I did was I just put some glue, I put some clamps, and I set it to the side. Took a few hours to dry, and that was it. It was done.
Now with any of these projects, you can market them on stores like Etsy. You can join groups on Facebook, so that way you're maybe in a gardening group or a woodworking group or a buy and sell. Find a community that's close to you that you can push these products to. You can post them just on Facebook Marketplace, and you'll end up getting messages here and there. But the best way for you to market these is either on stores like Etsy. The best place for you to market items like these are going to be in stores like Etsy or in person. So for in-person marketing, you can reach out to local small businesses, or you can start maybe a booth at like a farmer's market or something like that, and just have a few displays of your items. Maybe have a business card that leads to a personal website that people can buy from. For the garden ones, go to your local nurseries, make out an agreement with them where they stock this item and they buy from you in bulk for a price point, and then they can sell it to a client for a higher price point. That way everybody's making a profit. You're providing the material or the product, and they're providing the clients that they already have. For cutting boards, you can reach out to real estate agencies, maybe local realtors, and they love giving gifts to customers that buy houses. Giving people free gifts is a good way to get repeat customers, and so they're always looking for little things that they can give to people. This is a good option. This is a good option. This is a good option. Anything that they can give their people for free, so that way they can hopefully have a return customer. They're going to be looking for that kind of stuff. Alright, well that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to do a short one for you guys so that way you weren't out on content for this week. And as you can see, I have been working on the workbench build. I'm going to ask you guys that are watching that aren't subscribed to please subscribe down below. We're going to do a giveaway when we hit 1,000 subscribers, and it's going to be something that I build. It's not going to be any of these. I actually have an idea for well, let's not spoil it. Let's just wait until we get there. So like and subscribe down below. We're going to finish this workbench now, and if you haven't seen it, then start watching the other ones.